this started because Zach Brock and I were both sort of like stranded in New Jersey during the pandemic. Um, he lived in like kind of like upstate South Orange, and I was staying at my parents at the beginning of it all when it was really bad because I got out of New York, So,
Lucky you.
um, so he just booked some gigs. He was like, it might be fun to do some playing, and we'll keep it just duo, so that we minimize the risk of people getting sick, you know. Um, so that's how it started. And then so me and him played. We did like a tour, and we just played a few shows, some outdoor shows, and it was just really just something to do. Um, then we played one gig where they wanted at least a drummer, just to fill it out a little more sonically. So we were like, well, if Kate is available, let's get him because he could play some crazy setup that's part drum set and part percussion. So he was, and we did that with him, and immediately we were just like, this is a band. you know it was it felt really great right away. So yeah, so then we just booked another tour and planned on recording, which we ended up doing several months ago now, and the record's coming out November 10th.
Like, yeah,
So yeah,
exciting
that's
stuff.
how it all came out.
I'd love
Actually,
to
there's a
hear.
single coming out tomorrow. Second single is coming out tomorrow.
Oh shit. Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll have all that linked in the description. Everyone out there
Okay.
listening.
Great.
And yeah, so I'd love to hear from you next. Like both as a musician and as a fan. Like what you think it is about unpredictable or unconventional sounding music that can make it be so great.
Hmm. Oh, that's a good question. I mean, for me, I don't think it's so much about something being unpredictable. Um, it's more just like something that feels honest, you know. Um, so I mean, things could be very straight down the middle, and I feel like if they're done well and with pure intention, then that I think is it can be moving, you know. At least for me personally, Um, I mean, things that are kind of left of center are cool if they're done well too. But sometimes that can feel dishonest and then not be engaging so much. Um,
Mhm.
so I think that's the thing that I look for more than anything else. But um, you know, uh, but I guess a lot of things that I tend to like maybe a little left of center, just because I mean I think in some ways if it's done honestly, it could be refreshing. It's just like something that you haven't heard before, which I think can be interesting.
Do you give music lessons?
I do sometimes.
I'm curious how you would describe being honest, like you just mentioned, to maybe someone who's your student.
hmm Um, I think basically, if you're making music, the things that get you into music in the first place, that like really turns you on, if you are striving to create that yourself and there's no ulterior motives like getting famous or getting this particular gig or making money. I mean, those things are of course nice, but I think they have to be secondary to just making something that turns you on,
Hmm.
you know. Um, so if you're making music from that place, um, then I think that is what can feel honest, and if you're not, that can feel dishonest. And I think a lot of times as a listener, you can kind of tell, you know. There's a lot of things that in the I guess in the that can distract us from getting into that pure thing, pure expression. You know, um, I think part of it is just making sure that you're making music that you like, and
Mm.
not trying to like please someone else necessarily. I think if you are making music that you like, you know, I heard David Byrne say once that, he makes music, he's a human being, he makes music for other human beings. And if he likes it, then he has to assume that there's going to be some other people that like it too. you know
Totally.
so I think that I kind of often remember that quote, and you know try and
Mm.
live by that.
I love it. So jumping a little bit to the side, you're no stranger to contrasting elements in an album and like, touching on different genres and things of that nature. A lot of your work, it's got these parts that sound completely different than the other
Hmm.
parts. It
Hmm.
can literally be a whole nother genre. And I'm wondering
Hmm.
what the added benefit of that is as it serves like the composition or the album, like zooming out more broadly.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, I think, speaking for myself, I just it's just kind of coming back to the trying to please myself to a certain extent. I have a lot of different influences that are, jazz, rock, blues, country, classical, um, Afrobeat, you know. And if I'm like writing something, a lot of times when I'm writing, I'm just sort of doing uh, kind of like noodling until I kind of stumble upon something that sparks my interest. And so I'm not thinking about genre or anything at all. It's just kind of whatever speaks to me in the moment. And then the next step, a lot of times, is just sort of letting it swim around in my head and just seeing what I naturally hear next, you know. Um, so it's kind of like an abstract process, I guess, um, but all of those things are going to come out in varying degrees depending on where it started, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say beyond that, you just want to make sure that, I try to make sure that there's uniformity between, in one song, and for instance, making sure that if there's changes, particularly in style, that they seem to organically move from one to the next rather than just being forced. And on a record, it's kind of the same thing. It's like trying to find things that kind of marry together
Mm.
rather than hey, one track being like death metal and the next one being country. It's kind of like maybe these don't go together so well unless that's your intention. That band Naked City, John Zorn's band Naked City, kind of does that, and it works awesome. um,
So it
but
sounds like this is more of like a symptom of your approach than really even something that has some sort of benefit.
yeah, I think so. Yeah, I don't intend to do it because it's not that I necessarily think it's beneficial or not. It's just kind of what seems to speak to me and what comes out naturally for me. I mean, all of these influences, I think, swim around in your head, in your heart, whatever you want to say, for your whole life, and then they are coming out through your own filter,
Hmm.
you know. And I think that, any artist's voice, I think, is sort of it's sort of that's what it is. I think it's just their influences coming out through their personal filter, you know.
And that's kind of where like that honesty is so important.
Yeah, I think so.
I love it. I'd love for you next to talk to me about what you think is most important when it comes to group dynamics in a band and being a great bandmate.
Hmm. Well, definitely respecting each other as artists and as people. Um, and listening, you know, making sure that you're not that your ego isn't taking over, you know,
Mm-hmm.
making the music, putting the music first above your individual self, you know, thinking about what is going to be the best thing for this song, for this part, or whatever, rather than thinking what can I do to make sure people know I'm here? you know? Um, so, I think when you're younger, it can be a little harder. I think as you get older, you start to realize that your ego is the least important thing in it, you know.
Hmm.
Um, I think that's probably maybe number one, respecting each other, keeping your ego in check, and serving the music before anything else.
Hmm.
In Snarky Puppy, um, there's so many great players, so um, it can be intimidating, but it's also very inspiring. And but yeah, we have to work together a lot because there's so many players. I mean, there's three guitars on the records, right, on almost every record. So we have to make sure that we are like really doing all three of those things that I mentioned.
Yeah,
So
easier said than done, especially like, you grow up with rock star dreams, trying to be the next Hannah Montana or something.
right.
And
Yeah, exactly.
This is Flowers on the Stage, a podcast about being creative and finding success. To support it, please check out our sponsors, New Belgium Brewing, Thrax CBD, and Ticket Relief, the ticketing company that plants trees with a portion of each ticket sold. And now, back to the episode.
using Hannah Montana as a segue, would you say that mindfulness and meditation can it all help someone be a better musician?
Yeah, I think so. I think that can be helpful for anything. I've been doing transcendental meditation since like 2014.
Hmm.
So that's kind of like a big part of what I do. Um, and yeah, it's interesting because I've been doing it for a while now, and sometimes I kind of take what I've gained from it for granted, because it's hard to remember what I was like, you know. But when I think about it, I've thought about it at various times. I definitely feel like I'm more or less reactive um to stress and anything like that. It seems it's a little bit easier to keep it in check,
Hmm.
and not forcing it to be in check. It's just sort of naturally feels a little easier, you know. And so that can help a lot, especially in pretty high stress demands like making a Snarky Puppy record can be a lot of work. um, so it helps for that for sure. But I think also it just kind of helps you transcend your ego. So it makes it a little bit easier to get to that place in your intuition where I think all art comes from. Um, it's just kind of like a natural byproduct of the technique, I think, of the practice.
Can you speak a little more on, like you mentioned these super awesome phrases like transcend your ego and tap into that
Mm,
intuition where all great art comes from. Like,
mm,
let's say, you're doing a music lesson with an 11-year-old, 12-year-old, someone
mhm.
who their eyes open wide when you say that, but they don't really know what you mean. Like, how would you kind of
Yeah.
spell that out?
That's a tough one. I might not say that to an 11-year-old, depending on what vibe I'm getting from them.
An
But
advanced 11-year-old.
yeah, but I think one thing I would do with a student trying to get to that same place is maybe not say any of that, but what I would do is probably um I'd probably try and get them to just play um without thinking about anything.
Hmm.
And just try and encourage them to just put your hands on the instrument and play. Just you can call it free improvising, you know. Um, and I think maybe spending a little bit of time doing that every day is probably could be helpful, you know. Um, because I think what you really want to do is turn off your analytical mind that's sort of always judging and second guessing and trying to prove something and all of those things. So trying to get past all of that and just create something from something beyond all of those things, which, you know, it's kind of like your intuition, just trusting your intuition and trusting your ears and just playing, you know. And so maybe I would do that with an 11-year-old, you know, and seeing if that sparks something in them, you know.
Yeah, that we'd all be lucky to have that lesson as an 11-year-old.
Yeah, it's, you know, I don't teach that much. I used to teach a lot, but before I was into all of this stuff. So I didn't do that with anyone at the time.
What would you say is the personality trait that you most admire in people that you work with and people that you like play with?
I think I'd say dedication to the music, you know, work ethic, like hardworking people who put the music first, and any baggage that there might be, you know, leaving it at the door, you know, and just really getting into the music, you know. Yeah, that's probably the number one, you know.
What about leadership? What have you learned that's most important with, you know, someone in a leadership position about how to be a great leader?
Well, I guess I would say being, you know, letting, in terms of like music, let's say, making sure that you're not micromanaging to the point that you're stifling the musicians from being able to play like they play, you know. I think encouraging the people you're playing with to put as much of themselves into the music as possible is going to help the music. I mean, I think we have ideas of how we want things to be, as the leader, as a band leader or a composer or something, but I think it's good to know that and then also be able to let it go and let it be like a living thing that these other musicians are contributing to as well. I think sometimes, you know, especially when I was younger, I would sometimes get discouraged in myself if things didn't sound exactly how I wanted them to sound in my head, you know, and I'd say, what am I doing wrong? What am I not explaining right? Or why did I not write this good enough? You know? But I think letting people sit with it and live with it and letting it be a living thing always often ends up breeding something better than I had envisioned anyway, you know? And being able to like manage stress, I think, because it can be a very stressful thing, you know? And Mike League from Snarky Puppy, he's a great band leader. And I think I've learned from him, just watching him deal with stressful situations really well, you know, was inspiring. So it's something I take away from him for sure. You know, putting everybody at ease. I mean, you want everybody to feel comfortable, you know.
Easier said than done. Not an easy task.
Yeah, definitely.
Jumping a little bit to the side, I'd love for you, if you can, to share either like a specific moment or project that kind of challenged your preconceptions about music and maybe made you rethink your approach in any particular ways.
Yeah. Well, there was like, God, it was a long time ago now, I guess. But I started playing in this Afrobeat band in New York. And they were like great band. It's called Underground System. They're still around. And I had played a lot of like funk music and like James Brown and stuff like that. So we were playing a lot of like Fela Kuti and things like that in this band. So, and I kind of felt like, oh, I can do this. You know, this is like just another version of like James Brown and stuff, you know. And they were like really sticklers about having the right sounds and the right feel. And that was one of those experiences where it completely opened my eyes to like this other world. It's like
Hmm.
quite different than things like James Brown. So it was very cool to like really get in there. And me and the guitar player often would get together and just play these parts, just the two of us, with a click, with a loop, with the record, with nothing. And we would work on tone together and get all of this stuff like really um, as close to the original as we could, you know. And that was very eye-opening and kind of changed the way that I approached certain kinds of groove music for sure.
How
You know, but
specifically?
well, like in the case of Afrobeat, everything's sort of like based on a clave.
Hmm.
You know, it's like if you're it's like, or that's like the 2-3, or it could be 3-2. You know, and most of the music is one of those two things, and everything that you're playing, as you know, the guitar parts, bass parts, drums, everything is often hinting at those at that clave.
Hmm.
So you know, being aware and being able to hear that clave in my head, even if nobody's actually playing it, you know,
Hmm.
was something that I hadn't really done before. You know, in addition to like, you know, making sure that you're, you know, playing with other members of the band. Like I realized that like in this particular song, like my buddy is the drummer. Like we have certain parts that lock up. It's like we're really in a conversation on this tune, you know, and on this tune it might be the bass line, you know.
Got it.
And
Got
so
it.
listening to everybody, but really honing in on that particular instrument that is really in conversation with my part, you know.
Interesting.
And you know, I had played a lot of groove music that is similar in certain ways, but never with that much detail, you know. And with that stuff in particular, it's just the same thing for like 12 minutes, you know. So you're really just locking into this part for a long time. And it's, you know, it's kind of trance like, you know, and it was really fun and also eye-opening to like really hone in on different instruments in the band and see how my part matches with them and how it also matches with the clave and everything else. You know, it was like kind of changed my way of looking at groove stuff, you know.
That's awesome. Yeah, and it's insane how, all the details that go into it. And then on the other end, as a fan, it just feels like it goes by in the blink of an eye. Even though
Yeah.
it's like you mentioned, like a 12-minute song.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of it's interesting. It's crazy.
It's crazy how the brain works.
Yeah,
Anyways,
true.
got a couple more questions for you here, but Bob, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for
Yeah,
taking the
man.
time and joining me here.
Yeah, of course. Happy to do it.
And if you're out there and you listen this far, got links in the description. Check out their new album coming out from Bob Lanzetti Ogawa Trio. And
Mhm.
yeah, catch them live in NYC on November 9th.
Yeah.
So starting to wrap up here, a couple more questions.
Mhm.
You can even consider this like a rapid fire round if you'd like.
Okay.
What advice do you think old you would say to you now if given the opportunity?
Oh, like wait. You mean younger me or old me?
Old you.
Future me.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Um, future me would say to me now to don't be concerned so much with every, like, let's just say solo that I play. Because even though I'm saying all these things about not thinking and not being judgmental, it's really hard to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And I still do it.
Mhm.
You know, I think I'm so into this stuff because I do that, you know. I've thought about it so much because I do it, you know. Um, so try to look at the bigger picture. You know, what is it that you're trying to say as an artist on this record or on this song or in this solo, and not worrying so much about everything being what I perceive to be as perfect, you
Mm.
know.
It's so easy to get sucked into the minutia of things. And
Yeah.
what's something with your creative process outside of avoiding perfectionism that you stay away from doing that you think has helped you, be successful?
Hmm. Um, I try to not. Well, one thing I've tried to do is to not get so caught up with making sure that I'm working all the time.
Mm.
Um, I think I've gone through periods where like I felt like, I wanted to play all the gigs and do all the stuff that can possibly be done. And at a certain point, if I had a lot of time, I would just devote that time to writing music or practicing or doing my own thing and not worrying so much about if I happen to be working right now, and just sort of trying to take advantage of those times where I'm not hired to do something, to try and be creative,
Mm.
and just not worrying about it at all and just letting that guide me. Be creative, trying to be creative, writing or practicing or whatever it may be, and then take advantage of those times when they're there.
Mm.
um and I guess I would also say not trying not to do things that I don't really want to be doing. I think when you're young, like, you kind of say yes to everything, and you get used to saying yes to everything, and then when you get older, I know for me, I was still saying yes to things that maybe I shouldn't have, because maybe it's, you have the night off, so you're like, yeah, I'll do that gig, but you don't really want to do it, and you say yes anyway, or it's not enough money or whatever the case may be. And then sometimes another offer comes along that's something that you want to do, and then you can't because you're doing something you don't want to do already. So kind of learning when to say no.
I love it. Next, let's say you have a child and you get to write one piece of advice in their pocket that they can have, for the rest of their life. And what advice would you give them about living a life they can be proud of?
Oh boy, let's see. I would say, but whatever you're doing, make sure you're doing it with integrity.
Mm.
If you're a creative person and you're doing something in arts, just make sure that you're doing it for the right reasons. You're trying to put something into the world that you would want to experience yourself.
I love it. I love it. I think we should wrap it there. I like how that's full circle.
Okay.
Awesome. Well, Bob, thank
Cool.
you so much for the time. And yeah, everyone out there listening, check out those links in the description. New trio, all that good
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
Heck yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, man.
Thank you.
I'm Katie Daly, producer of Flowers on the Stage. This episode is brought to you by New Belgium Brewing.